there, this is Mrs. Fendrick from Alphonsa W. Davis Middle School, where I teach language arts. If you like to take pictures or draw pictures or paint them, then you will like today's lesson about visual literacy. Not only will it help you take better pictures or create better pictures, but our main purpose is to help you describe pictures or what you see. Welcome to a lesson on visual literacy. Our learning targets today are to be able to define and identify visual components and to be able to write precise words to describe photos and other illustrations. You will need some paper and something to write with. Throughout this video, you are expected to take a few notes. When you see the icon of the orange pencil, you will know that there is something on the screen that is important for you to write down. One of our essential questions today is, how do I compose a great picture? The first important term is the word perspective, and you will want to write down how to define this word. The definition of perspective is the view or camera angle. Here are words that you can use to describe a camera angle. The words could be close up, far away, from the front, the side, behind, the top, or the bottom of a subject. You will want to write this down. Here are three pictures that we can take a look at as examples of perspective. Let's look at the first one together. We see the shoes here, very similar shoes on the feet of these people. And where do you suppose the photographer was standing? Hopefully you can tell that the photographer was standing up and looking down at the feet of his subject. In the center, we have a picture of a basketball coming out of a hoop. Where do you think the photographer would have been when he or she took this picture? The perspective is looking up at the basketball coming out of the hoop. So the camera was likely positioned somewhere underneath this hoop, looking up. In the last picture here on the right, we see a young man on a canoe, looks like getting ready to paddle, and it almost looks as though the photographer could have been seated behind the young man and taking the picture that way. So the perspective here is from behind the main subject, which is the man in the front of the canoe. Here's a photo that was taken by my daughter and her friend as they drove down a highway in Nebraska. Let's imagine some horizontal grid lines dividing the photo into thirds. This is called the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds also includes imaginary grid lines that divide the photo into thirds vertically. Both the horizontal and vertical lines together look like the grid used in a tic-tac-toe game. The idea here is to avoid putting a subject in the dead center of the photo. Notice that the girls and the main parts of the car and the highway are not in the middle zone of this picture. The subjects are off center, which makes the photo more interesting than putting them in the middle of it. In fact, the photographer or artist is supposed to try to place subjects at the intersection of the horizontal and vertical lines, which I have marked here, or along one of the lines themselves. This is because our eyes naturally see these points first in an illustration. Sometimes this can be achieved by cropping a photo after you take it, but it's better to try and compose it well in the first place. Most smartphones have a way for you to see these imaginary grid lines when you take a photo. After this lesson is over, you can check your camera settings to see if you have selected the grid to make it possible for you to visualize the best way to compose your pictures. Lighting is important in a photo as well. This picture is backlit because the photographer was shooting into bright sunlight behind the basketball players. This effect makes the people appear as silhouettes, and even though we cannot see their faces, the picture is interesting in the way the dark figures contrast with the bright blue sky and the ocean in the background. Notice that the ball appears right on one of the visual intersections. This photo has good composition because the hoop is in the upper left section and most of the players' heads are all in the lower sections, pretty close to the horizontal line. Can you describe the camera angle or perspective in this photo? The photographer was taking the picture from the side of the game. What precise words can you use to describe this photo? Did you notice that the person in the picture is aligned all along the left vertical grid line? Where are the focal points of the subject? They're here and here. The most important parts of the young man are not in the middle of the photo. His face is in the upper part of the photo, and his feet on the skateboard are in the lower part of the picture. And he has space in front of him where he is moving forward. He is looking to the right side of the photo. So the photographer's perspective was again from the side. Let's try another one. How would you describe this photo to someone who has not seen it? Can you figure out the camera angle? It looks like the photographer was in front of the soccer player. How would you explain where this young man is located in the picture? The man's body is aligned along the right vertical grid line, What is the other focal point of this picture? Of course, it's the soccer ball, and your eye will be drawn to the soccer ball, which is aligned with the upper horizontal grid line on the left side. When you are writing about a picture, it's important to use precise words to describe it so that readers who have not seen the picture can see it in their minds. And this is true whether you're writing about a piece of art, a painting or a drawing, or a photograph. You will want to sketch a tic-tac-toe grid and write down the words naming each section of the grid. So draw your grid with your pencil or pen, and all of the top sections are marked upper, and all of the middle sections can be marked center, and all of the bottom sections will be marked lower. Then you need to add that to each section that it's either on the left, the middle or center, or the right side of the picture. So I have two words describing each section, except for the dead center, which we're just going to call center. Let's continue taking a few notes. There are two types of descriptive words you can use. The first kind refers to literal observations, and the other involves inferencing. The literal observations are things that anyone can actually see in the picture. This includes camera angle and lighting. You will also need to describe what's in the photo, such as people, things, or a landscape, and tell how many there are, what the color of each thing is, what the subjects are doing, where they are placed in the picture, and other details such as the background. As you know, inferencing involves making a reasonable guess from the information that you have. You can infer more about the picture based on what you see. You can describe what you think is going on and why. You can also try to figure out the photographer's or artist's purpose for taking or creating the picture. So inferences involve your opinions. Let's apply precise vocabulary to this photo. We will begin with perspective. What's the camera angle? The camera is underwater and to the side, near the back of the swimmer who is swimming away from the photographer. Can you see imaginary grid lines in your head? Let's make some other literal observations. Where is the main subject in this picture? Look for the swimmer's head and arms. They are along the upper horizontal line in the center of the picture, while most of the swimmer's, where we see his legs and his feet, appear in the center left section. Where are most of the bubbles? There are bubbles all along the left side, mostly in the upper left section, with a few in the upper center. What are some literal observations we can make about this scene? The scene appears to be a swimming pool because there are lines along the lower and center sections of the picture, as well as lane ropes in the upper center and upper right sections. The water is clear inside a light blue pool. The main swimmer here is a male wearing black trunks, or what athletes call jammers. And if you look carefully, you can see that there's another swimmer in the left center background. What inferences can you make about where this photo was taken? If you consider the bright lighting, the photo could have been taken in either an outdoor pool on a sunny day or an indoor pool with very good lighting. Did you notice the reflection of the swimmer appearing in the upper center part of the photo? What other inferences can you make about the swimmer himself? I can infer that he is doing freestyle because of the position of his bent elbow with the other arm straight in front of him and straight legs that appear to be kicking with one higher than the other. And if I look very closely, I can see that he is wearing goggles. But there doesn't appear to be a lot of other swimmers in the water, so I assume that he is swimming laps or practicing rather than participating in a race or competition. Here is another picture. How would you describe it to someone who hasn't seen it? What are some literal observations about where the subjects are placed in this photo? Let's start with the main subject. The camera angle is behind a man with short dark hair, wearing a solid dark blue t-shirt and gray sweatpants, who is balanced on a hoverboard along the left vertical grid line. The man is holding a leash in his right hand, which is attached to a dog who is near the intersection here of the lower horizontal and right vertical lines. They are walking in the street. I know that because I can see some street markings here, toward an intersection with green pine trees. What can be said about the lighting in this photo? The hoverboard is lit up, and this is a literal observation. An inference might be that this photo was taken at night because there are many dark spaces. The man and his dog appear illuminated by street lights, and there's a streak of light from the upper center extending to the upper right that may be from a street light. The man is not wearing a coat or a jacket, and we see spots of green grass here. So that suggests it might be a warm time of year, such as spring or summer. What can we say or infer about the photographer's purpose for taking the photo. Did you notice the aqua-colored trademark and text in the left center section? This is the logo of a company that makes hoverboards. Does this information help you understand the photographer's purpose? I believe that someone took this photo for an advertisement to help sell hoverboards. Let's consider the specific reasons why people take or make pictures. You will need to write down some notes about this. Some reasons are listed here and include to document an event for news or education, to gather evidence or preserve facts, to sell something as we saw in the last photo, to remember someone or something, to create a work of art, or when a person takes a selfie for self-expression. Think about the artist's purpose as you examine this picture by the Italian artist Giovanni Caselli. What was the perspective that Mr. Caselli used to draw his photo? The drawing puts the viewer directly in front of the main subject, who is a white-skinned woman who appears to be hanging from a tree by a noose. What are some literal observations we can make about her? Let's start with what she is wearing. She has on a long, flowing white dress and she is barefoot. Her arms are above her head with her hands around the rope above her. There appears to be some long tentacles extending out from the woman, and the sky in the background is yellow. There's a distant brown mountain as well as smaller hills and greenery. How can you describe the placement of the main subject in the picture so that your reader will know where she was located in the drawing? You might say the woman's body appears along the right vertical line, with her head and hands in the upper center and upper right sections of the picture. Now, what literal observations can you make about the other smaller subject in this picture? In the left lower and left center sections of the picture, there is another white-skinned woman wearing a long white dress with ornate gold trim decorating the top. She's facing the viewer, holding a long spear in her right hand, and she seems to be looking towards the other woman, and her left hand is flexed toward the woman in the tree. The smaller woman has on a gold helmet, and it's trimmed in a large flat red stripe that goes along the center of her head, which appears in the lower horizontal, near the horizontal line right above it. You can probably more easily infer some things about this particular picture if you know the artist's purpose. I'm going to provide some background information because this picture is supposed to illustrate a famous Greek myth about problems between mortal humans and gods and goddesses. See if you recognize the story. Arachne was a young mortal woman who bragged about her ability to weave cloth. She even claimed to be a better weaver than the goddess Athena. They had a weaving contest, and Arachne should have known better than to offend a goddess by showing off. When Athena had had enough of Arachne's attitude, she turned her into a spider who could weave webs the rest of her life. In fact, spiders today are called arachnids, after Arachne in this famous story. Did your interpretation of the picture change after you heard the story? Knowing that myth may now help you understand the artist's purpose. Giovanni Caselli drew the picture to illustrate the myth of Arachne and Athena for a mythology book. Knowing this might help you see some things you could have missed. We can infer, for example, that the main subject hanging from the noose is Arachne, and the other woman is the goddess Athena. What do these tentacles look like now? Do you see where a spider's body almost seems to beginning to be imposed over Athena's body? Perhaps this drawing represents the part of the story in which Athena magically changed Arachne into a spider. Notice how Athena is holding her hand as if she is using it to cast a spell. And the expression on Arachne's face is probably one of fear. Let's look at another very different picture to see how the knowledge of background information affects the viewer's ability to correctly infer the scene. This black and white picture seems to be old, and you may recognize the tall man in the middle of the photo who is wearing a top hat. The man in the top hat is indeed Abraham Lincoln. On the left is Alan Pinkerton. He was the head of Union intelligence. And on the right is the Union General John McClernand. This picture shows Lincoln's face in the center section. Even though the rule of thirds tells us this is not the preferred way to compose the photo, you might notice that this tent in the background seems to frame Lincoln, with the top point of the tent appearing in the upper center section of the photo. This is actually a famous photo that was taken by Alexander Gardner on an important Civil War battlefield in 1862. The men don't look happy, but we need more information to make good inferences about the circumstances of this picture. To understand why the men were posed that way, you need to understand the customs and camera equipment available at the time. Photographers had to use big cameras 160 years ago, and making pictures was a complicated process. You won't see action photos from that time because subjects had to stand absolutely still for anywhere from 30 seconds to a few minutes, depending on the light. Anything or anyone that moved would appear blurry in the picture. After each picture was taken, photographers like Alexander Gardner had to use dangerous chemicals to immediately process a large glass negative, so not many photos could be taken at one time. It was also the style of the time for men to stand with their hands inside their jackets. And you can see this in the way that Mr. Pinkerton and the general are standing. It was also not the custom for people to smile for pictures the way we do now. Perhaps you can now correctly infer that Alexander Gardner's purpose for taking this picture was to document the Civil War. Here's an important point you need to write down. When you are writing about a picture, you need to describe it so that the reader will know what it looks like, even if he or she has not seen it. Remember to use precise words to write both literal observations and inferences. You will need to explain the camera angle, the main subjects, the colors, the lighting, and everything that you see in detail. Be specific when you describe pictures.
I am so happy that you were able to stick with the lesson all the way to the end, so that now you can not only create better pictures, but you can write better descriptions of what you see.